So today we begin our study of plants, and we'll actually be looking at how plants perform our 8 functions of sterngrr. So in our previous unit, the beginning of Unit 5.1, we talked about the 6 kingdoms of life and went into a little bit of detail about how those organisms were made, what type of cells were they made up of, and then we also talked about some special features, like our archaebacteria being able to live in extreme environments, and our eubacteria that can cause illness and disease. And so these next 2 sections in Unit 5.2 and 5.3, we'll be first looking at plants. How do they perform all 8 of those life characteristics, those life functions that we abbreviate as sterngrr. And then later on we'll talk about how plants do the same. So we're going to start off our notes by being on page 101. And again, we're talking about those life functions. How do they perform those life functions? And so one of the first life functions is synthesis. And we want to describe how do they differentiate their cells for these different types of synthesis. If you looked at that first picture we had here, what's going on? Well, you have a plant leaf. It's taking in sunlight, it's taking in carbon dioxide and water, and then out of this reaction, this chemical process, we're producing some carbohydrates and oxygen. So what type of synthesis is this? So our leaf structure and our stem structure of a plant are both going to be able to have cells that perform photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is going to mean, photo referring to light, and synthesis, remember, means to make or build. So you're going to make or build food, actually, using light. So photosynthesis. And when we're using that light, we're going to build up carbohydrates for structure and energy. So for a plant, when they're going through photosynthesis, not only are they making food for themselves, and that's what we've all been taught to understand, that photosynthesis is how plants feed themselves, but they're also going to use those carbohydrates to make structural features, like their cell wall. Remember that the cell wall is made up of cellulose, and that's not going to be used for food, that's not going to be used for energy, but it is going to be used for structure. So inside the plant, we have some chloroplasts. Inside the plant, we have what's known as chloroplast, and that is going to be in the leaves and stems of the plant. The chloroplast, let's remember, is an organelle, and that organelle is going to allow the plant to receive light. Okay? Plant cells, let's remind ourselves that plant cells are eukaryotic. Eukaryotic. EU meaning true, kary meaning nucleus. It has a true nucleus, and it also means that it can have complex structures like organelles such as the chloroplast. Inside of the chloroplast of the plant, and here they're actually showing you one chloroplast structure, you're going to have smaller divisions inside of it and enzymes inside of it as well that is actually going to help speed up the reaction. We're going to be turning inorganic carbon dioxide and water into an organic sugar, C6H12O6, and releasing O2. When you write down this chemical formula, and you do need to know this formula, let's write it with the subscripts, okay? So C small 6, H12O6. And same thing with O2. You want to O, small to subscript, okay? So the plant is going to be using that carbon dioxide from the air, water from its environment, and it's going to turn it into that sugar. This is the carbohydrate. Okay, this sugar is also known as a carb. Now the plant can use that carb to turn it into a structural component, like making its cell wall, or it can use it as food. But either way, it's going to release oxygen as waste. Okay? We use oxygen, so for us, oxygen is beneficial. But in this reaction, in this process, oxygen is considered a waste. Some factors that influence the rate of the reaction are temperature and light intensity. That means that we can speed up the reaction, make it work even faster, or we can slow it down. If it's really, really cool, what happens when things are really, really cool? Well, things slow down, and so do reactions like photosynthesis. If we have less light available, if the chloroplast doesn't have as much light to take into its structure, then we're going to have less photosynthesis occurring. So in order to make food and also structural components, the photosynthesis equation is CO2, and make sure you write the 2 as a subscript, plus H2O plus light equals C6H12O6 plus O2. Okay, this chemical reaction you have to remember. And one thing that should help you is that this is almost exactly the same or the opposite of how all living things break down food during respiration. So photosynthesis and respiration are almost opposite reactions. And so that should help you remember that. And the last, the second function that we're talking about today is going to be transport. So some plants are considered vascular plants, and that means that they have differentiated cells that help transport within the plant body. So some plants actually have structures, you can think of the veins in our body, that help carry things throughout. Transport doesn't mean you're going to get up and move around, okay? The plant's not going to get up and run around. But it can have nutrients and water moving in and out or up and down its structure. There are some non-vascular plants, like moss, that actually have to use diffusion. So vascular plants are going to have differentiated cells that help transport. But you have non-vascular plants that use diffusion. So vascular plants have special cells, non-vascular plants don't, and they just require diffusion, things moving from high to low. So let's write that in high to low for this diffusion. So vascular tissue or vascular cells act as tubes or vessels and transport in two different forms. So if you look at the picture, in the veins of a leaf, they travel down the stem and into the roots. If you're looking at the pictures that you have here, you have two types of vascular tissue. So let's label this. Okay, this is vascular tissue or cells. Okay, a bunch of cells make up tissue. You have xylem and you have phloem. Xylem is actually going to transport water, H2O. Phloem is going to transport nutrients. In a plant, food is going to be made in the leaves, and that food will actually move down. So phloem moves down. Water gets absorbed at the roots, so water actually gets pulled up, so xylem moves up. So both of these, xylem and phloem, are called vascular tissue or vascular cells, and they're going to move things within the plant. So here we have xylem transports water up, phloem transports sugars down. Make sure you also draw on the picture to help you remember this process. I do want to go back really quickly and look at that previous picture. Actually, let's look at this bottom picture here. In this bottom picture, I do want us to rewrite that formula for photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, and you want to write it above one of these pictures, whichever one you have more room on. So for photosynthesis, notice in the picture what they're showing you. You have light coming in plus water, H2o, plus CO2. That's going to produce our carbohydrate, C6H12O6, plus a little bit of oxygen, O2. And that picture on the left is going to show you a little better because it has all those coming in. But you will need to memorize this formula, okay? So make sure you write that down above the picture. And one last thing for today is excretion. And plants are going to excrete oxygen. So oxygen was produced as a waste product during photosynthesis, and that must be excreted to the environment. Plants are going to use what's known as guard cells to form openings called stomata, and this is where gases are going to be exchanged. So on this picture right here, you see that structure that on my picture is purple, okay, a very light purple. The outer structure itself, the cell, is going to be known as guard cells. The opening, or the hole, is going to be the stomata. You do need to know those structures, okay? So, guard cells, opening is stomata. One other thing I want to add to that picture, because we have a good picture of a leaf right here, is sometimes you also have to prevent things from leaving the cell. So we also have to try to prevent water from leaving the cell. So in order to prevent water, H2o loss, we can do one of two things. The first thing is the stomata stays closed. Okay? To prevent water loss, stomata can stay closed, so those guard cells will close it up. It's like a little opening, and we can open and close it. The other thing is that the plant also has a waxy outer layer called a cuticle, just like on your nails, cuticle, that helps prevent water loss, H2o loss. Okay, so two things to help prevent water loss. First, our stomata here can stay closed. Second is that we have this waxy cuticle. Okay, waxy cuticle that prevents water loss. What do I mean when I say it's waxy? Well, if you think about in elementary school, if you took a crayon, colored it on a sheet of paper, created a big kind of block of red or whatever color you're using, if you put a little drop of water on it, what does it do? Does it absorb through the crayon into the paper? No. That waxy layer helps prevent it from moving. And so that's where we're going to stop today, just looking at those first three life functions. And so take a minute to write a one-sentence summary on one of those functions.